Penguin Random House Audio presents The Murderer's Daughter by Jonathan Kellerman, read for you by Kathe Mazur. 5-year-old Grace lived with two strangers on the fringes of a desert. Biology and the law labeled them her parents, but Grace had never found them other than alien. As best she could tell, they felt the same way. Artis Normand Blades was 28 years old, tall, reedy, long-haired and patchily blonde-bearded, with a sliver of morose face dramatized by jug ears. Those bat-like appendages notwithstanding, he was semi-decent looking in a greasy, vaguely dangerous way. Only semi, because some of his God-given looks were long eroded by dope and alcohol, and a near-perfect record of bad decisions. Women of a certain type were drawn to Artis's easy smile and good bone structure. Dodie Funderburk was one of those. Dodie and Artis met when they both worked at Flapperjack's Pancake Palace, a struggling highway stop on the outskirts of the Antelope Valley. Artis was charged with scraping the grill and mopping the floors after closing. Dodie bussed tables during the night shift. They began flirting the first night they met, were doing it by the second, Dodie perched spread-legged on the kitchen counter, Artis just tall enough to get to the goal without a footstool. He was barely shy of 22, and already a serious alcoholic and dabbler in meth. Dodie, 3 years younger, had never enjoyed regular periods, and she'd always been a little curvy, so it took 4 months for her to realize she and Artis had created an embryo. One night at Flapper, she figured she should say something because her belly was getting swelled up. Walking over to Artis, who was smoking a blunt and mopping, she lifted up her t-shirt. "Yeah," he said, "that's what happens." Dodie said, "Sure does." Artis puffed and shrugged. "Got no money to get rid of it." "Okay," said Dodie. "Maybe I'll keep it." He walked away from her. "You love me, Artie?" "Sure." "Okay, I'll keep it." Marriage had never been considered. Artis had no desire for it, and while Dodie might not have minded, the way she figured they were already living together in her single-wide in a nice slot at Desert Dreams Park, because it was bigger than Artis's horse trailer at the rear of the long-dead palm tree farm where he'd been squatting for 2 years. On top of that, filing paper was a hassle and cost money, and no one Dodie knew, including her own parents, ever bothered. She didn't show a real big bump for a while, and went back to pretending it wasn't happening. That got harder and harder, and sometimes, when she was by herself, her thoughts tried to get happy with the situation. Other times she got low and had feelings deep inside that rose up like heartburn and made her cry. Maybe a baby would be fun, dressing it up, buying toys you could also play with, having someone think she was smart. Pushing out the baby was 18 hours of torture, and Artis wouldn't stick around in the delivery room for more than a few minutes, getting grossed out or bored with Dodie's screaming and cussing. Finally, she felt the weight of the baby settle on her chest. An apple-cheeked nurse said, "Hold her, dear, with your arms. She needs your comfort," folding Dodie's limbs over the blanket-wrapped bundle and pressing down so they'd stay there. Dodie wanted to smack the bitch. She kept her hands in place so the cow would finally let go. The nurse said, "There you go, dear, that's right. Oh, she's a cute one. After all your hard work, a fine bit of grace, no?" Dodie thought, "At least I got a name for it." That night, they brought the baby to her to feed, even though she said all she wanted was to sleep. "Oh, sweetie," said another nurse, "you can forget about sleep for a while." 2 days later, Dodie and Artis took the baby home. Bitch was right. 5-year-old Grace had no idea how she'd survived from infancy. She'd seen other families with babies in the trailer park, had a notion of what it took to raise an infant. Had the strangers actually done all that when she was tiny and helpless? Hard to believe. By 5, she had learned how to take care of herself. The bulk of the residents at Desert Dreams worked low-paying jobs. Some were disabled, mentally or physically or both, and sat around wondering how long they'd live. A few able-bodied idlers did nothing but drink and toke and loaf. Everyone at the trailer park was knowledgeable about the alphabet soup of government programs a person could score when functioning at or near the poverty line. One of those funds was for daycare, which at Desert Dreams meant that the state and the county paid Mrs. Rodriguez to watch a dozen children at her Peach State double-wide with the pots of cactus ringing the trailer. With that many kids, no one got much attention. But with the TV always on to cartoons, and boxes of books and toys left over from Mrs. Rodriguez's now adult children, plus cast-offs and dumpster dive prizes, plus plenty of space in the dirt to crawl around, just be careful of the needly plants, the daycare was okay with Grace. She wasn't much for playing with other children, liked watching Sesame Street and Electric Company, and by 4 she'd learned from the shows how to put letters together into rudimentary words. Years later, she realized she'd been blessed with an inherent grasp of the architecture of language. At the daycare, she just looked at it as word fun, another way of figuring things out because that was her thing, figuring the strangers out, figuring out how to eat, how to stay clean, what people meant when they did and said things. Grace, at 5, could read at an advanced first-grade level, but she never told anyone. Why would she? For sure, the strangers wouldn't care. By now, Artis was mostly drunk when he bothered to show up at all, and Dodie had taken to mumbling about getting the hell out of there and going somewhere she could be free. When drunk and mumbling collided, the result could be scary. Sometimes Artis's hand on Dodie's flesh made loud, snappy noises. Sometimes Dodie had marks on her and had to use extra makeup. Lots of women at Desert Dreams were patching up the same way. Grace pretended not to notice any of this. Mostly she crawled into the corner of the trailer's front room that served as her sleeping space. The single, fetid bedroom at the back of the trailer was reserved for Dodie, and when Artis showed up, both of them. Often at night, instead of sleeping, Grace would turn on the TV and watch without sound, laughing to herself at how crazy people could look moving their lips. Or she'd read one of the books she stole from Mrs. Rodriguez, and later from the preschool. She had her collection of words, new ones arriving all the time, and she could also add up numbers and make sense of how numbers worked and how to figure things out without asking anyone. One day, she figured, she'd be by herself, and that stuff could probably help. Dr. Grace Blades cradled the woman in her arms. Many therapists shied away from physical contact. Grace shied away from nothing. The haunted needed more than kind words, soft looks, and uh-huhs. They deserved more than the pathetic lie known as empathy. Grace had no respect for the concept of empathy. She'd lived in the Red Room. The woman continued to cry on Grace's shoulder. Her hands, nestled in Grace's cool, firm grip, were small and moist and limp. The woman's name was Helen. She'd begun treatment 3 years ago, seeing Grace as often as she needed, until moving from L.A. to Montana. Grace had offered to find her a local referral, but Helen refused, as Grace figured she would. 4 years ago, to the day, Helen's 19-year-old daughter had been raped, strangled, and mutilated. Identifying the monster who'd accomplished all that hadn't taken much in the way of detection. He lived with his parents, across an alley from the girl's studio apartment in Culver City, with a rear window affording him a full view of the girl's bedroom. Despite an extensive record of peeping that had escalated to sexual battery, he'd been coddled
Sample complete. Ready to continue?